The Ezras Hashem. Ezras Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Kiddushin Daf Chaf Gimel. Okay, hold on. Everybody. Okay. So today's daf is Masechta Kiddushin Daf Chaf Gimel, and we're going to begin Daf Chaf Beis Amid Beis about the last almost third of the Amid. Tana Rabbanim. We're discussing over here one of the kinyonim that you can acquire at Eved Kanani. So one of the kinyonim is called chazaka. Now we're familiar with chazaka means in case you don't have the money to pay for, let's say, a piece of land, so you could acquire a piece of land and show that you're the owner by doing chazaka. Chazaka means, let's say you put up a fence around the land, so then it's yours, even if you didn't pay for the money. But if you agreed, and the owner, the seller, says, okay, do a chazaka, you can acquire a piece of property. Okay, hold on. Hi, Louis, we just began. Chaf Beis Amid Beis. Tana Rabbanim. Keitzad b'chazaka. How do you acquire an eved with chazaka? In other words, you don't have money to pay for the eved, so you're not buying him with money, but you agreed that this Eved Kanani you're going to purchase. So what is the concept called chazaka on an Eved Kanani? So the answer is you have to show that you're the boss. So the Eved Kanani has to do something that he works for something, and that shows he does something specifically for the boss, and that shows that you acquired this Eved Kanani. So hit the loy minaloi if he untied your shoes, or he carried your clothing to the bathhouse. If shita, he helped you get undressed. Hirchitzoi, or he bathed you. Sochai, he smeared you with oil. Gerdoi, he rubbed you down. Hilbishoi, he put your clothing on. Hin Eloi, he put your shoes on. Here's an interesting one. Hig bi hoy, if the Eved Kanani lifted you, kanoi, you acquired the Eved Kanani. So Amar Rab Shimon said, you're telling me that Hagbah lifting doesn't work? Chazaka should not be stronger than Hagbah. Hagbah always works. So Chazaka cannot work in a place where Hagbah is not going to work. Hagbah is more universal. What it's my Kamar, the Gemara doesn't understand what Rab Shimon is talking about. It seemed from Rab Shimon that the Tanakama said lifting is not going to work, and Rab Shimon said lifting should work. But the Tanakama did say lifting is going to work. So how do you explain the Brisa? Amar Rav Ashi explained, the Tanakama said that if the Eved lifted the master, kanoi, he acquired, the master acquired him. But if the master lifted him, loy kanoi. Like say the master lifted the Eved, doesn't work. Rab Shimon said, loy tehek chazaka gedolim hagbah. Shakbah koinem b'chol makom. That's impossible. Hagbah should always work. Chazaka works, hagbah works. So in case the master who wants to buy this Eved lifts him up, that should work. But the Tanakama holds it doesn't work. Now the Gemara asks a fabulous question: if the Eved lifts up the master, then the master acquired the Eved. So the Gemara asks, now that you say hibuhu l'rabbi kanoi, if the Eved lifted the master, he acquired him. Elamiata, what about this? Shifcha kananis tikana bebia. Every shifcha kananis, if you want to buy a goyish maid, you should do bia with it. Why? Because by definition, when you do have intercourse with that shifcha kananis, you're on top, she's on the bottom. So in a certain way, she's lifting the Eved. She's lifting the person, the Adain that wants to acquire her. And we know that Bia doesn't work with Shifcha Kanainis. Answers the Gemara, fabulous answer. Kikam Rinam, what is lifting? When the Eved Kanani lifts an Adain, he's exerting himself. Zenahena, the master is enjoying it, and the Eved is exerting himself. But Shifcha Knanis with Bia, Hacha Zenahena v'Zenahena. Both of them are enjoying it. So therefore, that's not called a kinyan. So the Gemara says, what happened? if it's not the normal bia, it's through the back. So again, he's on top, but he's on top of her back. So she's not enjoying herself with that, and yet she's lifting him. So you could require an evet shivcha kananis would be a shalai kedarka. So the Gemara gives two answers. Amar achai the min achai man lei melon. Who said the lav hano isle tvarya? You see, everything gets into the Gemara. Who says that not the normal intercourse, bia shalai kedarka, she doesn't have hano from that? Yes, it's a lot of pain for her, but she does enjoy it. So therefore, that's not considered lifting, or that wouldn't be considered chazaka and acquiring her. The Torah says mishkevei isha hikisha kasav kedarka shaloi kedarka. It's always the same, that if bia kedarka, normal bia, would not koina shifka kananis, so bia shaloi kedarka would not koina shifka kananis, even if you held that she doesn't have a na from bia shaloi kedarka, that there's a juxtaposition that you cannot be koina any shifka kananis with bia. Now the Gemara tells us a story. Rav Huda from Hindu. So maybe he's from India, and he lived probably in Bavel, and he was a ger. He was a ger, an Indian ger. She'ein lo yorshim hava. He had no inheritors. Now, chalash, he got very sick. Now, what happens when a ger dies? Whoever grabs his assets first gets it. Now, he had an eved. Now, the question was, if he would die, then the eved would go free, because the eved would take a hold of himself and capture his freedom. But Marzutra came to visit him. Chazi the Takav le al Matuva. He saw that he's about to die. He saw Rabbi Yehuda Hindai, the ger, was about to die. Amalei la'avdei. So Marzutra said to the slave of Rabbi Yehuda, Shloif li misanai. Take off my shoe. In other words, he wanted the slave to perform. He wanted to perform chazak on the slave, and thereby acquiring him vamtuye lebese. And he wanted to take my shoes and bring it to my house to publicize that you are now my slave. So as soon as Rabbi Yehuda died, automatically this slave was reverted to the ownership of Marzutra, because Marzutra did chazaka on this slave by having him carry his shoe. So, because we didn't want a moment of time where Rabbi Yehuda Hindai died and the slave had a moment of freedom where he could acquire himself his freedom. So, Ikad Amri, one say Gadol Hava, that the ger, the slave, was an adult. Zeh perish l'misha, v'zeh perish l'chaim. This one, in other words, Rabbi Yehuda Hindai died, and Marzutra took his place as the owner of the slave. But had the slave been a katan, you didn't have to do the chazaka while the Rabbi Yehuda Hindai was alive, because even he dies, the katan would not acquire himself. So therefore, Rabbi Marzutra could have done the chazaka a little bit later on. Let's say an hour after he died. Others said no, katan hava. It was a katan. Udloy ka Abashol, and not like the following opinion of Abashol. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, ger shemes, a ger that dies. Uvizbuzu Yisrael Nechasav, and everybody started to looting his assets. Remember, a ger has no inheritors. So anybody who comes and says, "I'm taking this," it's yours. And let's say there were slaves among the assets of the estate of this ger that died, whether they're adult gerim, whether they're katanim gerim. And here's the point: as soon as he died, kanu atzmam, they acquired their freedom. B'nei chayrin, they are now free. So therefore, the story of Marzutra must have been, according to the Yikad Amri, was the slave was a katan, and Marzutra was concerned that if Rabbi Yehuda Hindai would die, and then the slave, even if it was a kid under bar mitzvah, he would acquire his own freedom. That's why Marzutra made sure to do chazaka while Rabbi Yehuda Hindai was still alive, and so it was not a moment that there was no owner on this slave. Abashol, Abashol says Ketanim will never buy their freedom after the ger dies. So therefore, whoever would acquire them after the death would still own the Ketanim. But the fact is, the Ikad Amri held like the Tanakama that if they were Ketanim, they would have gone free. That's why Marzutra made chazaka. Now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, in opinion of Rab Meir, okay, we call Beis and Beis. The Mishnah said that Eved Kanani is bought Kesef Shtar Chazaka. We discussed that. The Koines Atzma, he could buy his freedom Bekesef Al Yedei Acherim. If somebody pays the owner the money that he paid for the Eved Kanani and says, "Here's the money you paid for the Eved Kanani, free the Eved Kanani," he goes free. Uvishtar Al Yedei Atzma, or a star that the Adain gives directly to the freedom document that he gives directly to the slave. These were the words of Rameir. Now the Gemara wants to analyze that. Bekesef al yedei, we're going to Chaf Gimel Lamed Aleph. Bekesef al yedei acherim. The chesef has to be given by other people. Yes, avoloi al yedei atzmoi. If, let's say, the Eved himself has his own bank account, if he would give the money, it wouldn't work. And that's obvious why. Because even if the Eved has his own money in his pocket or in a bank, it really belongs to the other. Kol ma'asher kona Eved, kol kona rabbi. So what is kesef al yedei acherim? Means that somebody else can only pay his freedom. He himself cannot pay his freedom. But Mayaskina, what are we talking about? What is going on with this other person who's buying the freedom for this Eved? He's giving money to the master of the Eved and saying, let him go free. If you want to say Shloimi Datoi, he had no permission from the Eved to do so. The Eved himself was not aware that somebody is paying up for his freedom. So, Michte, let us see. Does that work? Shamini le Rameir. Rameir has this opinion, the Omar, who said, it is a detriment for an Eved to leave his master for Cheres. An Eved Kanani wants to be an Eved. Why? Because he can have his shifcha kanainis, and if he goes free, he now becomes a Jew. He can only marry a Jewish girl, so he'd rather be a goyish eved that can marry a eved shifcha kanainis. Furthermore, if he works for a kohen, he gets free truma, and therefore it's his detriment that to go free, according to Rameya Utanina, and we learned. You can only do things that merit a person without his awareness, but you can't do something to his detriment without his awareness. So therefore, according to Rameir, since it's a detriment for an Eved to go free, a stranger can't walk over to the other and say, I'm giving you money on behalf of this Eved Kanani, freedom. That's a detriment to the Eved to go free. Elapshita, it must be Medaitai, that the Eved gave full permission to this person to give the money on his behalf to the master. And that's exactly what the point of Rameir is saying. He could only somebody else can buy his freedom by paying the master. But he himself cannot do it. Why? There's no such a thing of an Eved owning something without his master automatically owning it. So there's no such a thing of an Eved having money in his name, because as soon as as soon as he opens account, it says his name on it, it automatically verts to the master. So he doesn't have money to buy his freedom out. So if that's the case, so the Gemara wants to understand what Rameir said in the end of the Mishnah. Let us see the end of the Mishnah. Rameir says, only a star can be given into his hand. Right? If the Eved is going free with a freedom document, the master has to give it to his hand. Only if he gives the freedom document into his hand, yes. But if the master gives the freedom document to somebody else, it wouldn't work. Now, why not? We just interpreted our Mishnah that everything is done with the awareness of the Eved. If it's with the knowledge of the Eved, why can't the Eved appoint somebody else to accept the freedom document on his behalf? The chitema, if you're going to say my ayidei atzmai, what does it mean ayidei atzmai? Means af al yidei atzmai. There's no chiddush that the Eved could appoint somebody to accept the shtar shichra on his behalf. But I would think that the Eved himself cannot accept the shtar shichra himself. Now, why wouldn't an Eved be able to accept his own shtar shichra? Very simple. When the master writes a shtar shichra and puts it into Eved's hands, well, whatever belongs to the hand of the Eved is automatically the master's. So you're not giving him anything. So could you ever free a slave? As soon as you put it into his hands, it's automatically the master's. So how does that work? the teaching works is it happens simultaneously. That when you give him a freedom document, he gets his freedom for a second to be the bilus of the ownership of his hand, to now be able to accept the freedom document as if it's in his own domain. So it happens simultaneously. Gitoi v'yodoi, his freedom document and his right to acquire things come simultaneously. So that's what it says. So but basically, what the Gemara concludes, that a mayor would hold that shtar could technically be given ayidei atzmai, and shtar could be given to somebody else. Says the Gemara, v'loitani hachi. That doesn't say somewhere else. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, b'shtar, if a master wants to free his eved with a shtar, ayidei atzmai, he can only give it to the eved. A mayor says you cannot give it to somebody else. Now, why not? If it's a freedom document, why can't the eved make a shliach and say, you accept my freedom document on my behalf? So Amar Abaye explained our Mishnah. La'olam shleimedate. La'olam, really, our Mishnah is talking about the eved has no awareness. So therefore, so why can't, so then let's say, if the eved has no awareness, then why is it by kesef, the money, somebody could buy his freedom out, it's a detriment to the eved. Shani kesef, if a stranger buys the eved out, hoyel the konile bal korche, maknele bal korche. The Gemara says that since an eved, when he's originally purchased, it's against his will. When somebody buys an eved, we don't ask the eved if you want to be sold to somebody else. It happens against his will. So also, when someone wants to buy his freedom, he gives money to the master and tells him free the eved, it could also happen against the will of the eved, even if it's a detriment to him. So the Gemara says, shtar nami, shtar should also work against the will of the eved, because despite being a detriment, when a person could buy an eved with a shtar against his will, so why can't shtar be given to acherim against his will? That's the question. If it's shloi midatoi, why can't the master, who doesn't tell the eved anything, sends the freedom document to somebody else? It's not going to work. Why not? So the Gemara says, Hai shtar l'chud v'hai shtar l'chud. They're two different documents. When you purchase a document, it's a purchase document. It says, I'm buying the eved. When it's a freedom document, it says, I am freeing the eved. Well, if you're freeing the eved, if the eved did not make you a shliach, did not make somebody a shliach, he cannot accept the shtar shikra on his behalf because it's a detriment. So the Gemara asks back, then why does a kesef work? Why if somebody buys out the eved, it works? One is a purchase. When you purchase an eved, that's one way of buying it, so it could be against his will. But buying his freedom is another type of money transaction. So why does it work against the will of the other, against the will of the eved? Answer the Gemara, tiva miachadhu. It's one coin. It doesn't say, coins are the same, whether using it for purchasing or using it to bail out the eved. Therefore, by kesef, it could be done ayidei acherim, even if the eved has no awareness to it. Shtar ayidei acherim would not work because the shtar document is it says on it that he goes free, and it's a detriment if somebody is accepting this freedom document on behalf of the eved, if the eved never made him a shliach. Rava said, Kesef Kabbalas Rabbi Garmaloi, Shtar Kabbalas Chacherim Garmaloi. Rava, in essence, agrees with Abaya that the Abaya, it's talking about Shloi Midatoi, and the Eved never has no awareness somebody's buying his freedom. But what makes the Eved go free when you pay money to the other? It's the fact that the master accepted the money, that causes the freedom. So therefore, it's the master that's causing the freedom against the will of the Eved. So that's why it can work, even if the eved has no awareness. By shtar, Kabbalas Acherim Garmalai. It's actually, it's the third party accepting the shtar, the freedom document, without the eved appointing him as his shliach. So since it's a detriment, it's not going to work. So let's see how this all plays out according to Rameir. Let's just see on the screen here. Rameir says that there's two ways to free an eved, bekesef and shtar. So we say over here that al yedei atzmai, to the eved to come up with the money and give it to the adam, it's not going to work because the eved has no money. He can't own money. Can somebody else buy his freedom out? Well, yes. If it's shloi medatoi, he would go free according to Abai and Rava. Yes. Even if it's shloi medate, he has no awareness, somebody else can buy his freedom out. Shtar could only work al yedei atzmai, of course, because gita v'yadin boim ke'echad. But can somebody else accept the shtar without the eved appointing him as a shliach? According to Rab Meir, it would not work because it's a detriment for him to leave his master. That's how we answered Rab Meir. Now we go to the back into the Mishnah. Mishnah said, the kesef, he goes free by himself. The kesef al yedei atzmai, and only if the eved comes up with the money, he can go free. Is that what the chachamim mean? Can somebody else come up with the money? It's not going to work. Why did the chachamim say only if the eved comes up with the money, he can go free? What about if somebody else comes up with the money? Can he buy his freedom? It wouldn't work. Even if the eved has no awareness that somebody else wants to buy his freedom, Rabbanan hold the Amr is a chus who it's not a detriment. It's actually a merit for a slave to leave his master and go free and become a full-fledged Jew. But Tanina, we have a brisa that says you can do a merit for somebody even if he never gave you permission. So therefore, because it's something good for him, and therefore, why wouldn't the Chachamim agree that kesef ayedei acherem, even without the awareness of the eved, would work? The chitema, if you want to say my ayedei atzmoi, what does the Chachamim mean? Ayedei atzmoi, afal yedei atzmoi. The Chachamim means that really he has no awareness, but the chiddush of the Chachamim is that he could come up with the money himself. And what's the chiddush? What's the novelty? It's possible for an eved to have money and own a bank account without it belonging to the master. That is the chiddush of the chachamim. That if he comes up with the money himself, he can buy his freedom out. If that's the case, let us see the end of the brisa. That shtar could only work if you give it to somebody else. The eved himself cannot keep it. Well, we know the Gita v'yadei bam ke'echad. Everybody agrees to this concept that why can't you give the eved himself the freedom document? His hand and the get, the freedom come simultaneously. So what would the chachamim mean that it would not work by himself? Really, al yedei atzmai it would work, and al yedei acherim it would work as well. And the chachamim say that even if he has no awareness, then it's an honor for an eved to go out from his master with freedom. So if you're holding the cheshbon over here, that means that chachamim hold that whether kesef or shtar, bein al yedei acherem, through al yedei atzmoi, no awareness, it's always going to work. So then why did the chachamim put it all together? In the Mishnah, why didn't the Chachamim darvinu v'nisninu? Why didn't they put it together and teach it short? The kesef a shtar, if you're freeing an eved with money or with a shtar, bein al yedei acherem, whether you give it to somebody else or somebody else pays the master, bein al yedei atzmai, whether the eved himself comes up with the money or whether the eved himself frees himself by accepting the freedom document. So what did our Mishnah mean to say b'shtar al yedei acherem? Only shtar can work al yedei acherem. Ella says the Gemara, the kesef bein al yedei acherem bein al yedei atzmai. That's true. So let's go back in the Chachamim's opinion. It's always going to be free. If you see on the screen, kesef and shtar, whether you're freeing kesef and shtar, it doesn't matter if you're giving it to himself. If he comes up with the money, the eved's possible to have money without the master owning it. And if somebody else buys his freedom, even without the awareness of the eved, it works because it's a merit for the eved to go free. And shtar also, if you give it to himself, gita v'yadei bam ke'echad. If somebody else accepts it, even without the awareness of the rabbi of the eved, it would go free because it's a chus for the eved to go free. So then what did the Mishnah mean? The Mishnah snuck in a third opinion. Beshtar is Rav Shimon ben Elazar. That goes according to Rav Shimon Elazar. So the Mishnah snuck in a third opinion. The Tanya we learned to the Brisa of Shimon ben Elazar Oimer Af B'Shtar Ayidei Cherim V'Lei Ayidei Atzmi V'Sholish Machlokes B'Dov, and that's the end of the Gemara. Basically, there's a third opinion called Rav Shimon ben Elazar. He's somewhat like Rameir. If the Eved comes up with the money himself, you're not free because the Eved cannot own any money. If somebody else pays the Eved on behalf of the Eved without the knowledge of the Eved, he would go free because it's a merit for him to go free. Same idea that the Chachamim would hold. But Shtar, he can't have it. You cannot, according to Shimon ben Elazar, you cannot give an Eved his own Shtar Shechar. Why? Because he holds, you don't say Gita v'yada ben kechad. As soon as you're going to give it to the hands of the Shechar, of the Eved, it really belongs to the master. So therefore, it's not going to work. So it won't work by Ayidei Atzmai. Ayidei Acherim, yeah, then it's a merit. But Ayidei Atzmai, it would not work. So now, that's a new chiddush. Amar Rabba, my time that Reb Shimon ben Elazar. What's the reason? I'm back into the Gemara. Gama la la ma isha. We have a gzeir shava la la ma isha. Ma isha. When you give a woman, you don't really own the woman. Ach yotzi get reshus sheinish lo. You have to put the get. The husband has to put the get into a domain that doesn't belong to him. Av eved, to order to free an eved, ach yotzi get reshus sheinish lo. You have to put it in a domain that does not belong to him. So you cannot put it into the hands of the eved. You must give it into the hands of somebody else. Boya, Rabba asked the question. Rab Shimon, we go to Amabais. Rab Shimon ben Elazar, Eved Kananu, Ma'ash Yasha Shliach Lekabel Gitim Yad Rabbi. Can an Eved Kanani become a Shliach to Bekabel a get from his master? Can he make a Shliach? According to Rab Shimon ben Elazar, you can't give it to the Eved himself, but can he make somebody a Shliach, B'Torah Shlichas? Not B'Torah, like he comes to the master and says, I'm a Shliach of this Eved Kanani. So Kiva the Gama La Lama Isha, since we have Gzeir Shava from Isha Ki Isha, it's like a regular, just like a woman that gets a get from her husband can make a shliach. So an Eved Kanani can also make a shliach. Or maybe it's different. Isha, the in matzi b'kabel skita shliach nami matzi ma'ashavi. Isha, you can give the get to her hand, so therefore she can make a shliach. But Eved, according to Rab Shimon ben Elazar, the iloi makabel gita, he can't be makabel the get because whatever you're going to put in his hand belongs to the master. Shliach nami loy matzi ma'ashavi. Then you shouldn't be able to make a shliach. So that was the question. As soon as Rabba asked this question, he gave his own answer. La la me isha ki isha. You have Gzeir Shava that just like a regular isha can make a shliach, so also an Eved Kanani can make a shliach. So, but it comes out a funny thing. The Eved Kanani cannot accept it into his hand, but he can make a shliach and have that person accept the get on his behalf. But how does that work? Well, Kahanim that work in the base of Migdash, and let's say a guy says, I promise I'm not having benefit from this kohen. That kohen could still do the avodah on his behalf in the base of Migdash and actually bring a carbon on this person's behalf, because shluchi derachmaninu, they work not for the Yisrael, but they work for God, and therefore even if you're a mudar hana, you swear you're not going to have any benefit from him, you could benefit from a kohen in the base of Migdash. Now the Isa Rav Huna said like this: the Isa kadai to shluchi dinaninu, they're our messengers. It can't be a kohen works for me. When I go to the base of Migdash, the kohen does not work for me. Is there something? I can't work in the base of Migdash because I'm a Yisrael. So my shliach can work for me. That the kohen is a shliach, and he's working on my behalf. It must be that cannot be. It must be he's working for God. So now, but that's not true. Avdei and Eved, when it comes to accepting his get, the ihu loy matzah mekabel gita, he himself can't get his get. The shliach matzah mashavi, but he can make a shliach. So therefore, we see that concept that even if you can't do something, you can make a shliach. So what was Rab Huna trying to prove? That the Kahanim working in the base of Migdash work for the Eibishter because it's something I can't do, so I can't make a shliach. It's not true. There are concepts in the Torah where by the Eved Kanani where he himself can't do it, and yet he can still make a shliach. And here we end. It's not true. Yisrael loy shaykh b'Torah's kabbalas klal. A Jew, a Yisrael, can't bring a carbon. I'm a Yisrael. I can't work in the base of Migdash. So therefore, that person cannot be my shliach. Eved, even an Eved Kanani, even though he can't accept his own get, he can be a shliach on another get shichror belonging to an eved that belongs to somebody else. So he's shayach to accept to be a shliach. The Tanya and accept the get. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Dira dvarim. It seems possible. She'eved mekabel gitay shel chavera miyad rabbi shel chavera. An eved could accept a get for his friend who is an eved, and the eved they have different masters. Miyad rabbi shel chavera. That eved belongs to another master, and so therefore that other master gives the get shichra to the friend of this eved, who's not his eved. That eved works for somebody else. Avaloi miyad rabbi shloi. But two evadim working for one master, it's not going to work. But we still see the concept that an eved could accept a get on behalf of his friend, the eved. Therefore, since he is in the concept of accepting gittin, so he can make another shliach to accept his own get shechrar. And that's how we'll end the Gemara over here. Okay.